She helped a quiet, homeless man, unknowing he was a disguised CEO testing humanity. What he did for her will shock you. The opulent boardroom of Omnitech Solutions shimmered under the chandeliers, each crystal facet catching the light, scattering intricate patterns across the polished obsidian table. It was a space designed for power, for decisions that shaped global economies, and now, it felt more like a stage for a macabre play. A collective, uneasy anticipation hung in the air, thick and stifling, a palpable tension that seemed to hum just beneath the surface of polite composure. Lysander Thorne, the architect of this very empire, now a commanding figure in a bespoke suit of dark charcoal, strode to the head of the polished obsidian table. His posture was ramrod straight, his movements deliberate, imbued with a newfound gravitas. His gaze, once clouded by a profound weariness that had etched itself deep into the lines around his eyes, now held an unnerving clarity, a sharp, piercing light that seemed to strip away pretenses, laying bare the true intentions of those it fell upon. He could feel their unease, their carefully constructed smiles faltering under his unexpected intensity. Brant, his nephew, perched at the table's edge, a picture of impatient entitlement in his perfectly tailored suit, tapped a manicured finger against a solid gold watch. The rhythmic click echoed subtly in the vast room, a testament to his barely contained eagerness. Serafina, Brant's fiancée, sat beside him, her face a mask of carefully constructed charm, her lips curved into a smile that never quite reached her calculating eyes. She fiddled with a diamond pendant that caught the light, a nervous habit that betrayed the calm she projected, her eyes darting nervously between Lysander and the hushed whispers of the other board members. They were all here, the vultures, gathered for what they believed would be their moment of triumph, the final acquisition of a fortune they felt was already theirs by divine right. They saw him as a fading star, a relic, ripe for the plucking. He could almost hear their internal conversations, their thinly veiled contempt for his perceived frailty. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lysander's voice, deep and resonant, cut through the tension like a finely honed blade, carrying a new, unfamiliar authority that made several people visibly flinch. It was a voice that commanded attention, leaving no room for argument or dissent. "I believe the time has come for us to conclude this charade." He paused, allowing his words to sink in, watching the subtle shifts in their expressions. Confusion, then a flicker of annoyance, began to spread across Brant's features, his carefully maintained composure cracking. Serafina, ever the opportunist, offered a saccharine smile, attempting to gauge the mood, her mind already calculating the angles. "Uncle Lysander," Brant began, his tone patronizing, laced with an almost condescending pity, "are you quite all right? You seem particularly lucid today. We were just discussing the future of Omnitech. And your, legacy." The implied message was clear: Lysander was old, perhaps senile, and it was time for them to take over, to gently usher him aside and claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on Lysander's lips, a silent acknowledgement of their predictable avarice, their utter lack of foresight. The irony of the situation, known only to him, was a bitter, yet satisfying, taste. He had given them every opportunity to reveal their true colors, to show him a single shred of genuine concern or affection, and they had not disappointed. Their performance of familial duty had been consistently appalling, their greed a constant, festering wound. "Oh, I am more than lucid, Brant," Lysander replied, his voice laced with a subtle, chilling irony that seemed to vibrate in the air. "In fact, I dare say I've never seen things more clearly. The game, my dear nephew, is over." Brant's arrogant smile faltered, replaced by a scowl that distorted his usually handsome features. Serafina's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion replacing her feigned concern, her carefully constructed mask slipping just enough to reveal the calculating mind beneath. The other board members exchanged uneasy glances, sensing a monumental shift in the tectonic plates beneath their feet. They had misjudged him, utterly and completely, taking his previous weariness for weakness, his quiet observations for senility. And the consequences, as the knowing narrator would attest, were about to be spectacularly devastating. The moment of reckoning, long orchestrated in the shadows, had finally arrived. Lysander Thorne had built an empire from silicon and dreams, from countless sleepless nights and a relentless pursuit of innovation. Omnitech Solutions was not just a company, it was a global behemoth, its innovations woven into the very fabric of modern life, touching every corner of the globe. Yet, as the years piled up, bringing with them unparalleled success and unimaginable wealth, so too did the weight of his immense fortune. It had transformed from a source of immense pride into a gilded cage, its bars forged from isolation and superficiality. He possessed everything money could buy, the private jets, the sprawling estates, the priceless art collections, yet he felt utterly, profoundly impoverished in spirit. His vast mansion, a monument to his success, echoed with a chilling emptiness that even the most extravagant parties could not fill. Every lavish dinner party, every philanthropic gala, every carefully choreographed family gathering served only to underscore the profound superficiality that had become the defining characteristic of his existence. He was surrounded by people, yet he had never felt more alone. The relationships in his life, particularly with his extended family, had long since calcified into transactional arrangements, hollow exchanges devoid of genuine affection. His late sister's son, Brant, and Brant's ambitious fiancée, Serafina, were the most egregious examples of this corrosive dynamic. They hovered like vultures, their gazes constantly fixed on his fortune, their affection a transparent performance that grew more unconvincing with each passing year. Each visit was punctuated by thinly veiled requests for capital, investment in dubious schemes that never quite materialized, or outright demands for extravagant gifts, justified by some invented necessity. They spoke of love, of family bonds, but their eyes betrayed a cold, calculating hunger, a relentless focus on the digits in his bank accounts. Lysander had seen it for years, the feigned concern when he coughed, the immediate shift to discussions of his will when a newspaper mentioned his age or speculated about his health. He had become a walking, talking ATM, a mere stepping stone to their desired lifestyle, a convenient means to an end. His disillusionment deepened with each hollow compliment, each forced laugh, each insincere promise of eternal gratitude. He yearned for genuine human connection, for an interaction untainted by the shadow of his immense wealth, for a kindness offered without expectation of reward or a hidden agenda. He longed for the simple, unburdened interactions that had been lost somewhere along the path to unimaginable fortune. The idea for his extraordinary test had simmered for months, a desperate, last-ditch effort to ascertain if any sliver of pure humanity remained in his orbit. He had observed, with a quiet, analytical despair, how easily wealth corrupted, how it turned even those who should have loved him into schemers and sycophants, their moral compasses irrevocably skewed by the lure of his money. He needed to strip himself bare, to shed the glittering armor of his fortune and face the world as a nobody, a truly vulnerable soul, utterly devoid of the power and influence that came with the Thorne name. Only then, he reasoned, would he see the unvarnished truth of people's characters, stripped of the veneer of social niceties and financial incentives. He sought not to condemn, but to understand, to find an answer to the gnawing question of whether kindness could truly exist untainted by self-interest. The planning was meticulous, a testament to the same strategic genius that had built Omnitech from a garage startup into a global titan. He began by studying the homeless, not from a distance, but through countless hours of research, observation, and discreet conversations with outreach workers who spent their lives on the streets. He learned their routines, their daily challenges, the subtle nuances of their existence, the unspoken codes, the places of shelter, the rhythms of survival. He acquired an extensive wardrobe of worn, ill-fitting clothes from charity shops, learning to layer them for warmth and to mimic the disheveled appearance of prolonged outdoor living. He let his hair grow wild, cultivated a ragged, unkempt beard, and practiced slumping his shoulders, altering his gait to appear less purposeful, and dulling the sharpness in his eyes that usually betrayed his formidable intellect. He even had a team of special effects artists, sworn to secrecy with ironclad non-disclosure agreements, subtly alter his facial features, adding prosthetic blemishes, age spots, and darkening his skin tone to complete the illusion. He would be Lysander Thorne no longer. He would be Silas, a man adrift, invisible to the world, a phantom in the bustling cityscape he had helped to build, a ghost haunting the very streets he had shaped. His personal accounts were meticulously secured, his vast wealth placed beyond his immediate reach, a deliberate act of self-deprivation. His legal affairs were entrusted to a single, fiercely loyal lawyer, Ms. Evelyn Reed, who alone knew the true scope of his plan and swore an oath of absolute secrecy. Lysander wanted no one to be able to access his vast resources while he was Silas, removing any temptation to cut short his experiment, to retreat to comfort when the discomfort became too great. He set up discreet, automated transfers to a separate, small account to cover basic necessities, just enough to survive, but intentionally kept himself on the brink, never enough to feel comfortable or secure. He chose specific locations for his daily existence, places frequented by his family and their associates, as well as by the general public, ensuring a wide cross-section of interactions and observations. It was a cruel test, perhaps, born of desperation, but one he felt was absolutely necessary. He was ready to vanish, to become a ghost in his own life, hoping against hope that he might find a beacon of light in the profound darkness he had come to inhabit. The transformation was chillingly effective. When Lysander Thorne, now Silas, first looked into a grimy, cracked mirror in a public restroom, he barely recognized the weary stranger staring back. His designer suits were replaced by layers of frayed, donated clothing that smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and desperation, an odor that clung to him like a second skin. His neatly trimmed silver hair was a tangled mess, and a thick, matted beard obscured the familiar contours of his jaw, making him appear years older, significantly less refined. His hands, once accustomed to the soft leather of boardrooms and the smooth surfaces of touchscreens, were now calloused and grimy, bearing the marks of a life lived outdoors. The world, which had once opened its doors to Lysander Thorne with obsequious deference, now looked right through Silas. It was a profound and jarring shift, a descent into utter anonymity, and the chill of invisibility was a constant companion, far more pervasive than the winter wind. His days became a stark education in human nature. He learned to distinguish the hurried footsteps of indifference from the sympathetic pauses of the few who acknowledged his presence. He felt the biting cold of winter night seep into his bones, the gnawing ache of hunger that became a familiar companion, and the crushing weight of public scorn, delivered through averted gazes, muttered insults, and open fear in the eyes of passers-by. He witnessed the casual cruelty of strangers, the dismissive waves of their hands, the contemptuous sniff, the way people would cross the street to avoid him. Yet, it was the interactions with his own family that truly tested his resolve and confirmed his deepest fears, solidifying the bitter conviction that had driven him to this extreme. One crisp autumn evening, as Silas huddled near the warm exhaust vent of a five-star restaurant, the kind of establishment he usually frequented, a familiar, high-pitched laugh cut through the ambient city noise. Brant and Serafina emerged from the establishment, their faces flushed with expensive wine and self-satisfaction, their laughter echoing a careless disregard for the world around them. Serafina, draped in a luxurious fur coat that seemed to mock the biting chill, shivered delicately, pulling her companion closer. "Darling, it's simply freezing out here," she chirped, her voice carrying an air of affected fragility, as if a slight breeze might shatter her porcelain existence. Brant, adjusting the silk scarf at his throat, nodded imperiously, his gaze sweeping over the street with an air of proprietary disdain. As they approached their waiting chauffeur-driven car, their eyes, for a fleeting moment, landed on Silas. Lysander, as Silas, instinctively slumped lower, making himself appear smaller, more pathetic, more deserving of their pity, if any existed within them. He extended a grimy hand, his voice raspy from disuse and the chill. "Excuse me, sir, ma'am, any spare change for a meal?" Brant's gaze swept over Silas with an expression of unadulterated disgust, his lips curling slightly. He didn't even pause, didn't break his stride. "Honestly, Serafina, the audacity of some people," he scoffed, loud enough for Silas to hear, his words edged with a dismissive contempt. "They just multiply. And so close to the restaurant. It's an absolute blight on the city's aesthetics." Serafina wrinkled her nose, a look of pure revulsion on her perfectly made-up face, as if she had just stepped in something unpleasant. "Oh, it's dreadful, darling. And look at him," she said, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that was perfectly audible, "he looks so frail. One hopes his condition doesn't inconvenience the family's assets, should he be related in some distant, unfortunate way." The words, spoken with such casual cruelty, such naked avarice, were a dagger to Lysander's heart, twisting and turning with each syllable. They weren't just dismissing a stranger, they were actively discussing his perceived weakness, his potential death, in relation to their inheritance, their only concern being the uninterrupted flow of his fortune into their hands. It was a stark, horrifying confirmation of their callousness, a moment that solidified Lysander's conviction that his grand experiment, however painful, was tragically necessary. Brant then tossed a single coin onto the pavement, not near Silas's outstretched hand, but deliberately a few feet away, as if touching him would contaminate him. He then pulled Serafina away, their laughter echoing mockingly as they disappeared into the plush interior of their luxury vehicle, the engine purring softly. Silas, as Lysander, watched them go, the bitter taste of betrayal far more potent than the gnawing hunger in his stomach. The chill of their disdain lingered long after they were gone. Days later, Silas found himself near an exclusive boutique on Fifth Avenue, a street lined with stores where Lysander Thorne had once spent millions without a second thought. Brant and Serafina were inside, engaged in a heated discussion with a sales associate about a custom-made watch, Brant's voice carrying through the open door, demanding special treatment. Silas, observing from a respectful distance, saw Brant toss a credit card onto the counter with a flourish, demanding a discount as a valued customer of the establishment's owner, a close friend of Lysander's. He watched as they emerged, weighed down with designer shopping bags, their faces beaming with the satisfaction of material acquisition. As they exited, Silas, feigning a stumble, brushed against Brant, a deliberate, calculated move. "Oh, forgive me, sir," Silas mumbled, his voice hoarse, "my apologies." Brant recoiled as if touched by a diseased animal, his face contorting in a mask of pure anger and revulsion. "Watch where you're going, you filthy vagrant," he snarled, pushing Silas away with an open palm. Serafina clutched her expensive handbag tighter, her eyes wide with manufactured fear. "Honestly, Brant, they should simply sweep them off the streets. They're an absolute menace," she declared, her voice dripping with disdain, her tone suggesting that the very existence of people like Silas was an affront to her sensibilities. They hurried away, their disgust palpable, leaving Silas to absorb the raw contempt that his disguise elicited. It was a grim confirmation that their disdain wasn't reserved for him alone but was a general prejudice against anyone they deemed beneath them, anyone who didn't fit into their meticulously curated world of wealth and privilege. The contrast was striking, a beacon in the pervasive gloom of his undercover existence that threatened to consume his last vestiges of hope. It came in the form of Ilara, a young barista at a small, independent coffee shop just off his usual route, a place that smelled perpetually of roasted beans and warm milk. Ilara was a vision of quiet resilience. Her worn jeans and faded t-shirt spoke of a life of struggle, of practical necessity over luxury, her quick, efficient movements behind the counter a testament to her diligent work ethic. Lysander, as Silas, had observed her for weeks, a silent, almost invisible presence on the bench outside her shop. He noticed the way she patiently handled rude customers, the small, almost imperceptible sigh she'd let out after a particularly demanding order, and the way her eyes would light up when she spoke of her passion for music. She would often hum melodies under her breath, a hopeful tune amidst the clatter of ceramic and the hiss of the espresso machine, her fingers tapping out rhythms on the counter. Lysander had seen her pull out a tattered notebook during her breaks, scribbling lyrics, her brow furrowed in concentration, lost in her own creative world. She wasn't just a barista, she was an aspiring musician, pouring her heart into her craft, even as she struggled to make ends meet. He knew, from his quiet observations, that she often skipped meals, opting instead for a cheap energy bar, her own financial state precarious, yet she never complained. One particularly cold morning, Silas had settled onto a bench outside Alara's coffee shop, the biting wind cutting through his thin layers of clothing, making him shiver uncontrollably. His stomach growled in protest, a familiar, unwelcome companion that gnawed at his insides. Alara, noticing him through the condensation on the window, her face etched with a fleeting moment of concern, emerged from the warmth of the shop, a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. Her smile was genuine, untainted by pity or judgment, a rare and precious thing in the world he now inhabited. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft but clear, carrying easily in the crisp air. "It's a brutal one out there today. Here, this might help." She offered the cup to him, its warmth seeping into his chilled fingers, a comforting embrace against the cold. "It's on the house," she added quickly, as if anticipating a refusal or a protest. Lysander, as Silas, looked up at her, startled by the simple, unadulterated kindness, a gesture offered without expectation. He mumbled a thank you, taking a sip of the rich, dark liquid. It was the first truly warm thing he had felt in weeks, both literally and figuratively, a warmth that spread from his hands to his chest. This small act of compassion became a ritual, a quiet affirmation of humanity that sustained him. Almost every day, Alara would bring Silas a cup of coffee. Sometimes, she would bring out a sandwich or a piece of fruit, always insisting it was extra from her own lunch, or a mistake from the kitchen, though Lysander, with his keen observational skills, knew she was often sacrificing part of her meager meal for him. She never asked for anything in return, never pried into his past, never treated him as anything less than a fellow human being deserving of respect. She would simply offer a kind word, a gentle smile, or a brief, casual conversation about the weather or the rhythm of the city. "Stay warm out there," she'd say, or, "Looks like rain tomorrow, try to find some shelter." Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight of profound empathy, a stark contrast to the cold indifference he received from almost everyone else. He saw the genuine struggle in her eyes, the worry lines etched around her mouth, yet her compassion remained unwavering, a constant flame in the darkness. One afternoon, Silas noticed Alara looking particularly tired, her shoulders slumped more than usual. He heard a snippet of her conversation with a colleague about her landlord raising the rent, and the struggle to afford her old, worn-out guitar strings, let alone a new instrument that might truly unleash her talent. Yet, when her break came, she still brought him a small, pre-packaged muffin and a cup of tea. "Had a bit of a rough morning, but this always helps," she said, gesturing to the muffin, a small, weary smile playing on her lips. "Hope it helps you too." Lysander felt a profound pang in his chest. This young woman, facing her own significant hardships, still possessed an abundance of pure, selfless generosity, a spirit untainted by her struggles. Her actions were not grand gestures, but consistent, quiet acts of humanity that chipped away at the cynical shell Lysander had built around his heart. She did not know he was a billionaire, she saw only a man in need, and she offered what she could, not out of obligation, but from an intrinsic goodness that shone brighter than any diamond. It was a truth Lysander had been searching for, a profound juxtaposition of his family's heartless greed and Alara's pure humanity. The painful truth about his legacy was now undeniable, forcing him to confront a life-altering decision about who truly deserved his trust and his vast fortune. The stage was set for the final act, the mask was about to fall, and the world was about to witness a reckoning. The day had arrived for the annual Omnitech shareholder meeting, an event usually marked by polite applause, staged smiles, and the dull drone of quarterly reports that promised steady if uninspiring growth. This year, however, it was different. Brandt, radiating an almost palpable smugness, his chest puffed out with self-importance, had ensured that the agenda included a pivotal vote on the company's future leadership, hinting darkly at Lysander's supposed declining health and increasing detachment. He envisioned himself stepping seamlessly into the role of CEO, consolidating his power, and, more importantly, securing his inheritance without further delay, without the annoying oversight of his aging uncle. Serafina, by his side, exuded an air of triumphant elegance, already picturing herself as the First Lady of Omnitech, her every move choreographed for maximum impact. The entire room, packed with shareholders, executives, and opportunistic family members, buzzed with an undercurrent of anticipation, a silent acknowledgement of the power play underway, like sharks circling their prey. Lysander Thorne, however, was not one to be easily outmaneuvered, his strategic mind honed by decades of corporate warfare. As Brant began his carefully rehearsed speech, his voice smooth and confident, painting a picture of a company adrift under its aging founder, the heavy oak doors at the back of the auditorium swung open with a soft, deliberate thud that cut through Brant's practiced cadence. All heads turned, a ripple of unease moving through the audience. Standing framed in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit that whispered of quiet power and undeniable authority, was Lysander Thorne. But he was not alone. Behind him, poised with an air of quiet authority and a gaze that missed nothing, stood his most trusted legal counsel, Ms. Evelyn Reed, her expression unreadable, a silent sentinel of justice. A ripple of shock went through the room, then a collective gasp. Brant's voice, mid-sentence, faltered, then died in his throat, his carefully constructed performance crumbling. His face, usually so composed and arrogant, drained of all color, turning a ghastly shade of white. Serafina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror, a stark realization beginning to dawn upon her. This was not the frail, disoriented uncle they had planned to sideline with such casual cruelty. This was the formidable titan of industry, his eyes blazing with an intensity they had long forgotten, an undeniable force of nature. Lysander walked slowly, deliberately, down the central aisle, his gaze sweeping over the faces of those who had plotted against him, lingering for a fraction of a second on Brant and Serafina, then moving on to the other board members who now squirmed uncomfortably in their seats, their bravado evaporating. The silence in the vast room was deafening, a heavy, suffocating blanket, punctuated only by the soft click of Lysander's expensive shoes on the polished marble floor. He reached the stage, took the microphone from Brant's trembling hand, a gesture of silent reclamation, and surveyed the stunned audience, his presence filling the vast space. Brant, Serafina, Lysander's voice, low and resonant, cut through the tension, a steel blade cloaked in velvet, each word meticulously chosen. And the rest of you, who have so eagerly anticipated my retirement. He paused, allowing the full weight of his words to settle, a cruel, knowing smile touching his lips. I believe there are a few matters we need to clarify before we proceed with any discussions about Omnitech's future, or indeed, my own legacy. He then projected a series of images onto the large screen behind him, controlled by a small remote in his hand. The first was a grainy, yet undeniably clear, photograph of Silas, huddled on a street corner, his face obscured by a matted beard and grime, his posture slumped in despair. A collective murmur arose from the audience, confusion turning to discomfort. Then, a second image, taken moments later, showed Brant and Serafina, their faces contorted in expressions of disgust, walking away from Silas, their backs to his outstretched hand, their indifference palpable. The accompanying audio, amplified through the room's sound system, was chillingly clear, every word distinct. Serafina's disdainful whisper, "One hopes his condition doesn't inconvenience the family's assets, should he be related in some distant, unfortunate way." The murmurs grew into shocked gasps, then outright exclamations of disbelief and horror. Brant and Serafina stood frozen, their faces pale, their eyes fixed on the screen in a desperate, horrified disbelief, as if watching a nightmare unfold before their very eyes. Lysander let the audio play for a few more agonizing seconds, allowing the full weight of their callousness to settle upon the room, allowing every single person to witness their true nature. Then, he spoke again, his voice now imbued with a chilling authority, undeniable and absolute. "For the past few months, I have been living amongst you, yet entirely invisible to most. I have been Silas, the filthy vagrant, the blight on the city's aesthetics. I wanted to understand the true nature of humanity, particularly those within my own sphere. And what I found," he paused, his gaze fixed on Brant and Serafina, their faces now a mask of utter horror, "was a profound disappointment from those I once considered family, those I had once held dear." He clicked the remote again. The screen now showed a series of images: Silas receiving coffee from Alara, her smile a beacon of warmth, Silas sharing a quiet conversation with her, her eyes filled with genuine concern, Alara offering him a part of her own meager lunch, her generosity shining through her own struggles. Then, Alara's soft, compassionate voice filled the room: "Stay warm out there, and hope it helps you too." The contrast was stark, brutal, and undeniable, painting a vivid picture of human nature's extremes. While some, Lysander continued, his voice heavy with contempt that resonated through the room, saw only an inconvenience, a burden, or a potential threat to their inheritance, others, with nothing to gain, showed me the true meaning of human kindness. A young woman, who herself struggles to make ends meet, consistently offered compassion, warmth, and sustenance, expecting nothing in return, simply because it was the right thing to do. He looked directly at Brant and Seraphina, their faces now streaked with tears, their composure utterly shattered. My test was simple: to discover who, if anyone, truly possessed a heart untainted by greed. And you, my dear nephew, and your fiancé, failed spectacularly. You saw a man at his lowest, and you mocked him, dismissed him, and worried only about how his perceived demise might benefit your avarice, your insatiable hunger for my fortune. He took a deep, steadying breath, his gaze sweeping over the silent, stunned faces in the room. Therefore, let me be clear. The future of Omnitech will not be entrusted to those who possess such a profound lack of empathy, such a cold disregard for human suffering. And my legacy, my fortune, will certainly not be squandered on those who would let a man starve on the street while discussing his supposed frailty in relation to family assets, as if human life were a mere accounting entry. The game, as I said earlier, is indeed over. And the rules of inheritance, gentlemen, have just been rewritten. A collective gasp swept through the room as the full implications of his words settled in. The masks had fallen, and the true faces of greed and generosity were now laid bare for all to see, a spectacle of truth long hidden. The revelation detonated like a carefully placed bomb, sending shockwaves through the lives of everyone in the room, particularly Brant and Seraphina, whose carefully constructed lives shattered around them. The immediate aftermath was a chaotic symphony of desperate pleas, furious accusations, and the cold, unyielding pronouncements of Lysander's legal team. Brant, his carefully constructed persona crumbling into dust, launched into a pathetic tirade, his voice cracking with a mixture of fear and outrage. "Uncle Lysander, this is madness. A cruel joke. You've gone senile. How could you would disgrace your own family over a homeless man." His entitlement, once so proudly displayed, was now stripped bare, revealing a raw, ugly vulnerability that was almost pitiable. Seraphina, ever the pragmatist, abandoning the pretense of anger, tried a different tactic, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face, a performance of profound sorrow. "Lysander, darling, you don't understand. It was a misunderstanding. We didn't know. We thought he was a common beggar. We would never have, please, you must believe us." Her performance was Oscar-worthy, a masterclass in feigned innocence, yet it rang hollow in the ears of a man who had seen her true colors painted in the grime of the streets, who had felt the sting of her disdain. Lysander, however, remained unmoved, his expression a mask of granite. He simply raised a hand, and Ms. Reed stepped forward, her voice clear and precise, cutting through Brant and Seraphina's histrionics. "Mr. Thorne has already initiated proceedings. Effective immediately, Mr. Brant Thorne's employment with Omnitech Solutions is terminated. All corporate credit cards and access to company accounts have been revoked. Furthermore, the substantial trust fund established for him will be dissolved, and all assets redirected to a new philanthropic foundation, dedicated to combating homelessness and promoting human compassion." Brant stumbled backward, as if physically struck by an unseen force. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, his face a ghastly shade of green, his world collapsing around him. Seraphina shrieked, a primal sound of pure, unadulterated panic, her carefully curated facade shattering into a million pieces. But the penthouse. The cars. The investments, she wailed, her voice rising to a frantic crescendo, proving once again where her true loyalties lay. Ms. Reed continued, unperturbed by the dramatics, her voice unwavering. As for Ms. Serafina Beaumont, any and all financial arrangements, gifts, or allowances previously extended by Mr. Thorne are hereby rescinded. Both individuals are requested to vacate any properties owned by Mr. Thorne within 24 hours. Legal action will be pursued for any attempts to misuse or withhold company assets, including the recovery of all gifts given under false pretenses of affection. The public humiliation was swift and brutal, a voracious media feasting on their downfall. News of the billionaire's undercover test exploded across global media, splashed across headlines and dissecting every excruciating detail of Brant and Serafina's downfall, their words and actions broadcast for the world to see. Their carefully cultivated social standing evaporated overnight. Friends vanished, business associates severed ties, and their lavish lifestyle, built entirely on expectation and inheritance, imploded dramatically. The penthouse, the luxury cars, the designer clothes, all became symbols of their spectacular ruin, monuments to their greed and folly. Their desperation turned into bitter recriminations, their engagement fracturing under the weight of their shared disgrace, their superficial bond proving utterly fragile. They had nothing but each other, and their mutual contempt, the very traits Lysander had hoped to avoid, had now become their only companions in their gilded cage of ignominy. Meanwhile, Elara, oblivious to the seismic shifts occurring in the upper echelons of society, was going about her usual routine, serving coffee, humming her tunes, and planning how to stretch her meager earnings to cover a new set of guitar strings, a small luxury she desperately desired. She was utterly unprepared when one afternoon, a sleek black car, quite unlike any that usually frequented her modest street, pulled up outside her coffee shop. Ms. Reed, accompanied by Lysander, who now looked exactly as he had before his transformation, impeccably dressed and radiating his usual aura of quiet authority, walked in. Elara, recognizing Lysander from the brief, professional interactions she'd had when he occasionally visited the shop as himself, before his Silas experiment, offered a polite, somewhat confused, smile, wondering why such a prominent figure would be visiting her small establishment. Elara, Lysander said, his voice gentle, a stark contrast to the steel it had held moments before in the boardroom, filled with warmth and gratitude. Do you remember Silas? Elara's brow furrowed in concentration, a flicker of concern crossing her features. Silas? Yes, of course. Is he, all right? I haven't seen him in a few days. Her concern was immediate and genuine, unfeigned. Lysander smiled, a rare, warm smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. He is, Elara. More than all right. Because Silas, my dear, was me. Elara's jaw dropped. She stared at him, then at Ms. Reed, then back at him, her mind struggling to process the impossible revelation. Disbelief, then shock, then a profound, almost overwhelming wave of emotion washed over her, her eyes widening as the pieces clicked into place. You were, she stammered, tears welling in her eyes, blurring her vision. Lysander nodded, his gaze tender. And your kindness, Elara, was a light in what had become a very dark world for me. You, with nothing to gain, offered more humanity than those who stood to inherit everything, those who had everything to lose. He then outlined his intentions, speaking with quiet conviction. He would be establishing a substantial trust in her name, providing not only financial security for life but also the means to pursue her musical dreams without the burden of financial struggle, without the weight of daily survival. He offered her a fully furnished apartment in a quiet, artistic neighborhood, a state-of-the-art recording studio equipped with the best instruments, and a team of seasoned professionals to help her launch her career, to nurture her talent. This is not a handout, Elara, he explained, his voice firm but kind, but an investment. An investment in the kind of genuine compassion that is far more valuable than any corporate empire, an investment in the goodness you represent. Ilara stood there, tears streaming freely down her face, utterly speechless, her humble world turned upside down. She, who had struggled for every penny, who had dreamed of music as an impossible luxury, who had given freely of her meager resources, was now being offered a future beyond her wildest imagination. It was an overwhelming torrent of emotion, a sudden, blinding light in the quiet, humble life she had known. The world, it seemed, truly did reward those who showed kindness, even when they least expected it, often when they had nothing to gain. Months turned into a year, then two. Lysander Thorne found a peace he had never known in the gilded cage of his former life, a tranquility that had eluded him even at the height of his power. He had stepped down as CEO of Omnitech, but remained on the board, guiding the company towards more ethical and sustainable practices, investing in technologies that genuinely benefited humanity rather than merely accumulating wealth. The philanthropic foundation he established, funded by the assets reallocated from Brandt's trust and a significant portion of his own fortune, focused on addressing homelessness, supporting the arts, and fostering community through compassion, recognizing the profound impact of simple human connection. He dedicated his time to overseeing its projects, finding a profound sense of purpose in giving back, not out of obligation, but out of a newfound understanding of what truly mattered, what truly brought meaning. The bitterness of betrayal had faded, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of having brought truth to light and having righted a profound imbalance. He no longer felt like a walking ATM, a mere dispenser of funds, but a steward of resources, directing them to where they could do the most good, healing old wounds through purposeful action. Ilara's life had blossomed, her talent finally given the space to flourish. With the freedom and resources provided by Lysander, she had poured herself into her music, the melodies and lyrics flowing from her with newfound ease. Her talent, once stifled by the daily grind of survival, now soared, reaching heights she could only have dreamed of. She released her first album, a poignant collection of songs reflecting her experiences, her struggles, and the profound kindness she had encountered, particularly from a man she once knew as Silas. Her music resonated with audiences, not just for its lyrical depth and melodic beauty, but for the authentic humanity that pulsed through every note, every word. She performed in packed venues, her voice a clear, hopeful beacon, touching hearts and inspiring many. She used her platform not only to share her art but also to advocate for social causes, particularly for those on the fringes of society, remembering the days when she too had felt invisible, when a cup of coffee had been a lifeline. She often volunteered at local shelters, bringing her guitar, sharing her music, and offering the same genuine kindness she had once extended to Silas, proving that true compassion was a renewable resource. She was living proof that compassion, when nurtured, could indeed yield the most extraordinary fruits, transforming lives. Brandt and Serafina, on the other hand, had vanished from the public eye, their names now synonymous with public disgrace, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. Stripped of their inherited wealth and social standing, they were forced to confront the true hollowness of their existence, the emptiness of their self-serving lives. Without Lysander's money, their superficial bond disintegrated entirely. They descended into bitter resentment, each blaming the other for their downfall, their lives a stark, cautionary tale of unchecked greed, a constant cycle of recrimination and despair. They had everything in the world, yet they had gained nothing of true value, and in their relentless pursuit of more, they had lost everything that truly mattered, dignity, respect, and any semblance of genuine human connection. The story of Lysander Thorne and his extraordinary test resonated far beyond the confines of the boardroom. It became a modern parable, whispered in cafes and discussed in newsrooms, a powerful reminder that true character is rarely revealed in the glow of success or the comfort of opulence. It is in the shadows, in moments of perceived vulnerability, when one has nothing to gain, that the deepest truths of the human spirit emerge. For it is in the darkness that the best of character shines brightest, and it is in the simple, selfless act of kindness that the universe, in its own mysterious way, ensures that true goodness is always, eventually, rewarded. If this story of truth, betrayal, and unexpected kindness resonated with you, then you're in the right place. We believe that the most compelling tales are often found in the quiet corners of the human heart. If you enjoyed this journey with Lysander and Ilara, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next captivating story. We have a whole library of narratives exploring similar themes of justice, redemption, and the surprising power of human connection. And now, we want to hear from you. What was the most shocking part of Lysander's reveal? Have you ever witnessed an unexpected act of kindness that changed your perspective? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories make this community truly special.